I want to welcome you to our wood identification video. In traveling around and visiting with woodworkers all over the United States, they've asked me, is there an easy way to identify woods? The answer is no, but there are some clues that will help you as you go. I brought out a representative sample of the common species you might be working with, and I thought I'd share with you some of the things we look at to identify them. Let me direct your attention over here for just 1 second. Four of the things that we often look at are first, weight, second, hardness, and these two are loosely related. That is, the more dense the wood, typically the harder it is. You may know that from a piece of hickory or maple. Color is another thing that gives the wood away, and wood comes in a rainbow of colors from a very white all the way up to almost a black in color. And finally, odor. Some woods have a very friendly odor, others are kind of an obnoxious odor. And we can use these as tools to help us identify various species. Let me point out some of the species I brought to you here to give you an idea of hardness and other things. This piece here is very light. And if you've ever built model airplanes, you know it as balsa wood. One of the things you'll notice is I can almost put my thumbnail into the species right down to the skin and leave a big mark like that. That type of mark tells me this is a very soft wood, and as soft as it is, I could just about rule out anything in the maple or cherry or that sort of thing. And because of its whiteness, I would rule out the darker woods such as cherry. The fact that it is soft like this gives me a clue. Let's move it back where it was though and put it next to this species. Color-wise, these look a lot alike, except you can see some darker brown lines in it. This one isn't quite as soft. I can bring my thumbnail into it just a little bit. This wood is used a lot in cabinetry. It's also used a lot for carving, such as duck decoys and so forth. It's basswood, and because of its uniform white color and its very straight grain and softness, it's a great carving wood. It also sands and shapes nicely. Many of the things we use paint grade for, that is, if we're going to paint the furniture or cabinetry after the fact, we'll use this wood because it takes paint very well, and with the paint on it, it's hard enough to handle just about anything we would submit it to. Drawer sides are often made of this as well. As we move down, we see this wood has changed. It's not quite as white, and indeed parts of it look different. This is a quarter sawn piece, and we can see that because of the annular rings going up and down like so. In this piece, the color is quite uniform. This wood is referred to as yellow poplar. Now, interestingly enough, the color here is almost a blend of these two. The very green is the heartwood, and the very white is the sapwood. The heartwood changes colors as the tree matures and is found closer to the center of the tree or the heart of the tree. Yellow poplar will vary in color from that very white to this kind of gray color to this bright green. And again, you might select this out. Where is poplar used? Poplar is used a lot in framework in cabinets because it's a little harder than basswood, yet it machines real well, takes glue real well, and will accept screws and nails if it's been pre-drilled quite nicely. So you can see a definite color difference even in that same species, and that's why color can be deceptive, but it's another tool you can use. This piece of wood right here is a little whiter in color. This is hard maple, and there's absolutely no way I can push my thumbnail into it. As I look at this piece of wood, we can look at the edge, and because of the nature of the grain, we can see a very uniform color to it. But as I turn to the other side, I see a very brown area. What happens in maple often is we get what we call mineral streaking, and this mineral streaking can give you kind of a deceptive color in the wood and can be tricky. You won't see this throughout the piece, but in some areas you will see it. Again, that's hard maple. It's very white. Where do we use that? It's a great turning wood because it is so hard. I've actually seen pool cue shafts made of this, something that takes a big hit, and it also has to be dense enough to not recoil much. Softer woods wouldn't be appropriate for that. Maple is also used for some furniture, although it's a little harder to work, and one wouldn't usually use hand tools with it. As we go down, we see the wood start to get browner and yellower in color. I have a piece of white oak here, which has more of a yellow color to it. This is a representative flat sawn piece, and the grain is really relatively uniform. The piece that is beneath it is what we call quarter sawn, and if you look at these flakes in here, this is what gives quarter sawn oak its appearance. White quarter sawn oak will have those flakes on the surface. What are those flakes exactly? Well, if you look at the end grain, you can see almost like a pencil line going through that end grain. That's what's known as a medullary ray. And when we cut through that, it shows in the surface as a flake on the surface. And that's what gives it its real unique color and look. Quarter sawn, of course, is favored because of its dimensional stability, but it also has a unique look to it. So it's favored for furniture work, raised panels indoors, and a lot of times it's made into veneers to veneer cabinet sides and larger panels such as door fronts. So that's white oak, and that's the differences. Here's another wood that varies in color, and this would be representative of the colors that you'd find in it. This isn't quite as hard, and you can see I can dig my thumbnail in here again. This is about the same hardness as basswood, and this is known as willow. Willow, when stained, will look a lot like walnut, and that's what's often done. It's an inexpensive wood. It's a hard wood that can be used to match walnut and use a cheaper wood to kind of fool people and make it look richer than it is. The color will wander from a heart to a sapwood in these tones, and that's real typical of what you'll find. The edge color of these two is quite similar, although there is a slight difference. We'll know right away, we can't hardly dig our thumbnail into this wood. This is almost as hard as maple, and it's cherry. Now, this has a nice red color, and that's what's favored by woodworkers who make up furniture, cutting boards, anything of that nature. And cherry tends to get darker with age, so it'll get darker and darker, almost looking like walnut in an aged piece. Let's take a look at another piece of it. This red color is actually the heartwood. As we get out further in the tree, the sapwood is a very white color, almost deceptively like maple or poplar. So you see what happens is the color can be tricky, and it's better to look at more than one piece before you make an evaluation. So the color will range in the sapwood as a very light to the heartwood, which would be a very dark, almost to a red. So that's cherry, a real good hardwood to work with. Now as I look at these two pieces, the colors are very similar here, except when I look closely, I see there's more pores in the surface, little openings on the surface. This is mahogany, and mahogany has a real nice dark color to it, and generally is available in fairly wide and thick boards, so it's favored for a lot of cabinet work, and mahogany stains up and works real nicely. As far as hardness, it's softer than cherry. It works quite nicely with hand tools and is a great wood to work with. Now I mentioned odor. If you've ever had a cedar chest, you can identify this species. This is known as aromatic red cedar, and it has a distinct odor to it. In fact, the odor is so heavy that in giving a test to woodworkers once, I had a group of samples rubber banded together, and the two pieces that were on either side, when they laid them out, they smelled them, they said, that's got to be cedar. So the odor really traveled in the pieces when in light there was only one piece, and that was between them. So odor has a little bit to do with the identification of cherry, or I'm sorry, with the identification of aromatic red cedar. As you look at this piece, you see a little difference in color, and there will be different hues from a very red to more of an orangish color, and of course the sapwood appears as a white band there. So there's a lot of variety of that in colors. There's also a lot of knots in it. Aromatic red is often sold in tongue and groove pieces so that you could line a cedar chest with thinner pieces or line a closet, and that's probably its chief use. You don't really use that for furniture wood, and you don't put a finish on it because you want that odor to come through. Probably the king of all woods in the United States is black walnut. And this is a good representative sample of the blacker part of black walnut. It's a very dark wood. But as we get out further in the tree, we start to see the heartwood getting lighter and turning into a sapwood as it makes its transition. So there's definitely a lot of color in walnut. Most people who work walnut favor this real dark color, but it's not always available. So they find themselves with these lighter boards, and in many cases they'll stain it, sometimes actually sap staining it. That is, putting a penetrating stain on this area to make it almost as dark as this portion, and then finally putting a pigment stain over the entire piece to give it a much darker, more uniform look, much like what you see here. So as you look at these various species, remember the four things that I've suggested: weight and hardness, which are very closely related; color, which can be all over the rainbow, but we can use this as a tool to isolate various species; and in some cases, odor. In this case, we talked about aromatic red cedar. If you have a chance, find a piece of cottonwood and smell that. You'll definitely get an odor. Well, these are some of the types of wood that you'll be working with, and hopefully I've cleared up some of the clouds that exist on the horizon related to wood ID. As you think about these species, look over 3 or 4 pieces. It'll help you determine what's going on. And the more you work trying to identify woods, the easier it will be to identify them. And remember, if you want to be a better woodworker, do more woodworking. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you on another tape.